The gym was packed, a sea of caps and gowns swaying under bright lights. Cameras flashed, phones lifted, recording every moment as names were called. Parents smiled, classmates cheered, friends clapped. I stepped forward, diploma in hand, expecting the applause, the nods, the quiet pride. This was supposed to be my moment, but then it happened. My dad rose mid-ceremony, voice cutting through the clamor like a blade. "You are not our child." A hush slammed over the crowd, phones lifted higher, faces froze in disbelief. My mom didn't intervene, she reinforced it, sharp and certain. "We disown you. You've brought shame to this family." Gasps ricocheted through the bleachers. Murmurs, nervous laughter, whispers. I could hear my own heartbeat booming in my ears as if it wanted to escape. The applause evaporated, swallowed by shock. Cameras swiveled. Friends' expressions flickered between fear and confusion. Everyone was watching, recording, holding their breath. Flashbacks stabbed through me in rapid succession. The dinners where Megan, my older sister, was praised endlessly while I shrank into corners, my ideas dismissed. The whispered lectures, "Stop embarrassing us. Why can't you be more like your sister?" The rolled eyes, the subtle smirks at my mistakes, the quiet shame pressed into every family gathering. Every memory condensed into this one unbearable public moment. Heat climbed my neck and cheeks. The crowd didn't know the history, they only sensed injustice, tension, humiliation. Every micro-expression around me, the frozen smiles, the widened eyes, the involuntary flinches, told me they were witnessing something rare, almost cinematic in its cruelty. And yet, amid the chaos, something flickered inside me. Defiance. I wasn't going to collapse, I couldn't. Every sneer, every dismissive comment, every word of doubt from years past had been fuel. But first I had to survive. I had to take note, every word, every face, every sound. The pieces of a puzzle I would assemble later, a puzzle no one in this gym would ever forget. Why would parents do this? What had I done to deserve it? And why did they act like they were completely certain of themselves? The answers weren't coming now, not yet. The crowd's collective breath hung in the air. Cameras continued rolling. And I took my first step off the stage, not as the embarrassed child they assumed I was, but as someone quietly beginning a long game. A game they would come to regret. Even as the gym held its collective breath from my dad's words, my mind snapped back to senior year, the year they had quietly, methodically written me off. Megan, my older sister, was everything I was supposed to be. Straight A's, student council president, invited to every elite event. She moved through the halls like she owned them, and my parents trailed behind like proud peacocks, smiles fixed, never once landing on me. I, on the other hand, was a variable they couldn't control. Creative, messy, questioning their rules. My ideas were cute. My projects were adorable but impractical. I once pitched a startup concept at the kitchen table. My dad shook his head, sharp and final. "Stop embarrassing us in front of people who matter." My mom sighed, eyes darting toward Megan, silently blaming me for tarnishing the family image. Each critique, each sideways glance, each whispered correction planted a single, unyielding seed. "You're the disappointment. You're the one to hide." Back in the gym, those memories hit like punches. Every word, every smirk, every judgment from years past. The public disowning wasn't a sudden explosion. It was the culmination of decades of expectation and strategic dismissal. The crowd didn't see the buildup, but I felt it in every nerve, every heartbeat. Every glance Megan had thrown when I presented a project. Every rolled eye at family dinners. Every pointed sigh or casual whisper, all of it formed a lattice of neglect, humiliation, and comparison, now detonating in front of hundreds of witnesses. Micro-tension crackled across the room. A friend in the audience hesitated, caught between shock and instinctive support. Megan's eyes narrowed for a split second, a flicker of superiority or maybe fear. My parents' faces were masks of conviction, but the cracks were there. A twitch in my dad's jaw, a slight hitch in my mom's breath, tiny tremors in control slipping from their grip. The audience, hungry for narrative, felt it too. Every 20-30 seconds, curiosity spiked. Why would these parents disown their child in front of everyone? What could possibly provoke such certainty? Every flashback, every whisper of judgment, every contrast between Megan's perfection and my failure kept viewers riveted, leaning in, hearts racing, desperate to see what came next. Amid the chaos, one realization solidified in me. Their obsession with control, appearances, and labeling me as the disappointment had blinded them to one critical fact. They had underestimated me completely. And that oversight, buried deep in the past, was about to become the seed for every step of my quiet, calculated comeback. It wasn't about grades. It wasn't about creativity, not even close. The graduation spectacle, the public disowning, was the final act of a plan my parents had meticulously orchestrated for years. This wasn't anger. It wasn't emotion. It was strategy, cold and precise, like chess masters who believed they were 3 moves ahead. The truth, I had refused. Refused to obey their rules, refused to play the role they had assigned me, refused to cover up their misdeeds or participate in the lies they prized above all else. Maybe it was the family business. I had declined to join despite relentless pressure. Maybe it was financial maneuvers they assumed I'd ignore, minor frauds they thought I'd silently accept. Maybe it was a marriage they had arranged, meant to protect their image. I had said no. Not angrily, not rebelliously, but with calm, unshakable certainty. Their public act wasn't punishment, it was preemptive. Disowning me in front of hundreds of eyes was insurance. A way to brand me as the shameful one before anyone could question them, before the truth, even a whisper, could leak and tarnish their carefully curated image. Every word, every gesture was calculated to maintain control. But they made a fatal mistake. They underestimated me. Their plan assumed fear, assumed invisibility, assumed that humiliation would crush me, silence me, bend me to their will. Instead, every accusation, every pointed pronouncement, every camera recording their theatrical confidence only sharpened my awareness. I noticed everything, the way Megan stiffened beside them, the slight hitch in my father's voice before he spoke, the flicker of worry in my mother's eyes. They thought they were controlling the narrative. They were blind to what was really happening. I had been watching for years, every slight, every hidden secret, every financial maneuver, every social connection. I had quietly been arming myself, turning every betrayal into leverage, every insult into data, every moment of supposed invisibility into power. The stage they thought was theirs had been rigged with consequences they couldn't yet see. They had planned to crush me, to erase me. Instead, they had simply illuminated the arena in which I would rise. The audience now understands this was never a rash decision. It was a calculated betrayal meant to intimidate. But in doing so, it revealed all the pieces I had been assembling for my quiet, unstoppable comeback. After graduation, the world shrank. Every street, every coffee shop, every familiar corner felt smaller, heavier, as if my life had been compressed into a spotlight of judgment. My parents' words, sharp, public, irreversible, echoed relentlessly. "You are not our child." Megan's smug smile haunted my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. The digital world offered no solace. My phone buzzed with muted messages from friends who didn't know how to respond or who were too afraid to. Social media amplified the subtle cruelty. Passive-aggressive posts, vague Instagram stories about family values and doing what's right. Each swipe, each notification felt like a needle piercing me, a constant reminder of what they thought they had stolen. Housing and work were no refuge either. The apartment I had hoped to move into fell through. My parents had quietly whispered warnings behind the scenes. Job applications went unanswered. Even friends maintained a careful distance, hesitant to step into the crossfire of family politics they couldn't navigate. I was broke, isolated, publicly humiliated, but I was still breathing, still watching, still calculating. It would have been easy to collapse under the weight of anger, embarrassment, and despair. But I didn't. Instead, I turned every slight into intelligence. Every family post, every subtle brag from Megan, every carefully crafted statement by my parents became data. I mapped patterns, where they overplayed, where their arrogance left cracks, where appearances were their only shield. Each whisper, each smirk, each social maneuver became a tool for a plan no one yet understood. And in that quiet, simmering rage, a revelation hit. They had believed public humiliation would break me. That exposure, embarrassment, and isolation would render me powerless. They had forgotten one critical fact. I had been watching them for years. Every secret, every hidden flaw, every assumed blind spot had been logged, stored, and catalogued with meticulous care. Even at rock bottom, even amid isolation and humiliation, a spark remained, quiet, unassuming, almost invisible. But it was alive, and that spark was about to ignite into something no one would see coming. While everyone assumed I was broken, defeated, even invisible, I was quietly assembling the pieces of a puzzle no one knew existed. Growing up, I had access, small, seemingly innocuous access, to emails, contracts, financial statements, and internal memos. At the time, I'd appeared indifferent, distracted, the quiet one. But every overlooked folder, every whispered phone call, every minor detail became a thread in a map I was weaving, a blueprint of the family's true structure. The business my father boasted about, inflated numbers, hollow achievements. The charity my mother paraded on social media, more spectacle than substance. Even Megan's perfect accolades bore faint fingerprints of influence and connections she assumed no one was tracking. I cataloged it all silently, mentally filing every flaw, every exaggeration, every hidden leverage point for a time that would matter. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was reconnaissance, preparation, and patience. I studied their habits. The way my father celebrated small wins while ignoring vulnerabilities, the way my mother curated appearances at the cost of reality, the subtle dependencies Megan relied on without question. Every predictable move, every overconfidence, every blind spot became data, a tool to be wielded with precision. I stayed invisible, I didn't boast, I didn't act. The timing had to be perfect. One misstep, one premature exposure, and it could look like bitterness or desperation or failure. But the longer I watched, the clearer it became. Their perfect image was a facade, paper-thin and fragile. Every crack, every exaggeration, every assumption they made about control and loyalty was a lever, quietly waiting for the right hand to pull it. And the most delicious truth, they had no idea I had been holding the lever all along. I disappeared into a tiny apartment downtown, the kind of place where no one would expect someone like me to survive, let alone build an empire. Days blurred into nights. I worked low-paying jobs, freelance gigs, side hustles, anything that kept the lights on and the path forward open. Every small win, a client landed, a project completed, a skill sharpened, was a brick in a foundation no one could see, no one could touch, no one could anticipate. I didn't post about it, I didn't brag. I stayed invisible, sharpening, observing, learning. Slowly, imperceptibly, momentum began to build. Survival turned into strategy. Strategy turned into growth. Doors opened that had always seemed locked. Opportunities that no one expected to be mine appeared in quiet succession. Each step calculated, each move deliberate, each victory invisible until it could no longer be ignored. And then the first hint of outside recognition arrived. A local journalist reached out, curious about a project I had quietly launched. Questions came about my family, about the infamous graduation, about what it had taken to reach this point. I answered carefully, revealing nothing that could expose my leverage, planting tiny seeds of intrigue instead, hints that the story was far deeper than anyone imagined. For the first time, I realized the narrative had shifted. People were watching, not just the world outside, but those who had underestimated me. While my parents and Megan remained cocooned in their fragile illusions of control, I was building something outside their reach. Quiet, unstoppable, and irreversible. And the moment of reckoning, the moment they would see the full picture, was slowly, inevitably approaching. The graduation clip leaked. A phone recording from someone in the crowd, capturing my parents' declaration, exploded online. Within hours, it went viral. Shock, outrage, disbelief, sympathy, comments stacked up like bricks against the image they had spent years constructing. Their polished reputation, once untouchable, teetered under scrutiny they couldn't control. I did nothing. I stayed silent, let them scramble. My father called friends trying to contain damage. My mother issued vague statements, careful not to say too much. Megan spun her version as a misunderstanding. Each frantic move only revealed cracks I had memorized. The flicker of doubt in my dad's eyes, the tremor in my mother's voice, Megan's forced composure collapsing under pressure. I watched it all with deliberate calm. My silence spoke louder than any argument. The public was leaning toward my side, piecing together the story I had been living quietly for years. I didn't need to fight. The narrative was bending toward me naturally, and the subtle hum beneath it all was delicious. They didn't know I had been waiting for this. They didn't realize that any move they made now would meet an invisible counter. For the first time, the power had shifted, and I was ready to let it unfold exactly as I had calculated. I didn't shout, I didn't rant, I let the facts do the work. Carefully, methodically, I released emails, contracts, and records, proof of the manipulations, lies, and facades my parents had built their image upon. Every post was precise, undeniable, documented. Drama was unnecessary. The truth spoke louder than any outburst ever could. The response was immediate. Support swelled, strangers rallied behind me. Megan's achievements, once untouchable, were now scrutinized. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives began questioning the foundation of everything they had believed about the family. The image they had controlled for decades began to fracture, silently but irreversibly. Inside the household, panic spread like wildfire. My parents scrambled to deflect, deny, spin, but every effort only illuminated their errors further. Megan's confidence faltered, every boast and carefully curated story now hollow. For the first time, I wasn't the one humiliated. They were. I remained calm, watching each reaction unfold. Every misstep they made, every flicker of doubt, confirmed what I had been building toward for years. A quiet, precise, unstoppable reversal that no one had expected. And this momentum, it had only just begun. Megan had always been untouchable, the family's golden child, the embodiment of perfection, control, and public pride. But the shockwave from my revelations hit her first. Invitations to exclusive events vanished. Colleagues whispered behind her back. Even a few trusted clients began questioning the integrity of everything she had built under the family name. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She approached me privately, her voice tight, clipped, careful. "You're ruining everything," she said, but it wasn't anger, it was panic. Every assumption she had relied on, the unquestioned superiority, the untouchable confidence, the social dominance, was evaporating, and I was the calm force orchestrating the collapse. Every attempt she made to reclaim control backfired. A misstatement in public, a hesitation where certainty should have been, a carefully rehearsed boast that fell flat. Each slip was magnified by the eyes of the world, watching, commenting, quietly celebrating. I didn't push, I didn't provoke. I only remained steady, letting the dominoes fall. Megan unraveled herself piece by piece, and I catalogued it all, every flinch, every quiver in her voice, every tremor of fear. The audience could feel it too. The golden child, once untouchable, now human, vulnerable, exposed. In that exposure, the shift in power became undeniable. The family that had dismissed me for decades could no longer ignore the truth. I had been preparing for this moment all along. Late evening. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Everyone else had retreated, leaving only the lingering weight of tension between us. My father, Harold, sat rigid, fingers steepled, jaw locked like a man clinging to authority that no longer existed. My mother, Margaret, folded her hands neatly, eyes avoiding mine, her usual calm replaced by subtle unease. For years, they had defined me by what I wasn't. The dumb one, the disappointment, the child who embarrasses us. Every word, every glance, every calculated comparison had been meant to keep me small. And now, after the slow unraveling, the exposure, the quiet dismantling of their perfect image, they were forced to confront the consequences. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand apologies. I let the silence stretch, each heartbeat a reminder of the decades they had underestimated me. Finally, I spoke. "You didn't disown me because I embarrassed you," I said, calm, precise, deliberate. "You disowned me because I wouldn't lie for you, because I refused to play the role you wanted, because I refused to be complicit in your image of perfection." Every twitch, every subtle inhale, every hesitation told me they understood. Harold blinked, swallowed hard, and shifted minutely in his chair. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line, a silent acknowledgement that the scales had tipped. The child they had labeled powerless was no longer beneath them. And in that quiet moment, recognition replaced fear and comprehension replaced anger. They saw finally that the public spectacle, the golden reputation, the control they thought absolute, it was gone. The narrative was no longer theirs. It had always been mine. Calm, unshakable, irrefutable, life had shifted quietly but irreversibly. My business grew steadily, built on the unseen grind while they assumed I was broken. My name was no longer tangled in humiliation. My reputation was restored, and the family that had once tried to erase me, permanently shaken. My parents moved around me with measured steps, careful words, subtle gestures, a choreography born of awareness that the balance of power had changed. Megan, the once untouchable golden child, never fully recovered. Invitations waned, opportunities stalled, and her carefully curated image faltered under scrutiny. When we crossed paths, she smiled politely, but the tremor beneath her confidence was unmistakable, hesitation in her voice, slight flinches in her posture, a constant, quiet reminder of what had shifted. I remained steady, calm, observant. The graduation video still circulated online, a relic of their failed attempt to erase me, but now it served as proof of the reversal. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't raged, I hadn't sought revenge with drama. I had let time, patience, and precision speak for me. Then came the invitation I had been waiting for: a stage, a crowd, another graduation. This time the applause was genuine. This time the audience saw the person I had always been, the one they had tried to dismiss. I stepped to the microphone, let my gaze sweep the crowd, and said softly, a small smile tugging at my lips, "They tried to erase my name. Turns out that's how people learned it." The applause thundered, but inside I knew the story wasn't finished. The family had been cracked, not destroyed. And the shadow of possibility, the quiet, inevitable power I now held, lingered, a reminder that the next move was entirely mine to make. Subscribe to my channel for more stories like this.